on how America evolved through the resentment of British policies. Our prompt was to evaluate the extent to which British policies over colonial North America led to an American Revolution that stressed local independence in governance, economics, and land expansion. Going into the 18th century, powerful European empires used mercantile strategies in an effort to build a strong economy and global trade network. The countries conquered colonies in the New World and used the raw resources as exports and trade. America was colonized by the British. Right before 1754, the British and French realized the importance of the Ohio River Valley due to its abundance of natural resources, as well as its prime location for commerce. This ignited the conflict between England and France to obtain the valley, which began the French and Indian War. Eventually, the British won the war, obtained the Ohio River Valley, drove the French away, and issued the Proclamation of 1763 to stop the frontier expansion. The colonists were angered by the proclamation because they were expecting to be able to reap the benefits of the land west of the Appalachian Mountains. Yet the British obtained a giant war debt and had no way to pay it off. Initially, the British introduced many taxes and acts that limited the representation and power of the American colonists. As England continuously restricted the freedoms of these colonists, they decided to challenge the mercantile policies of Britain by committing a series of colonial rebellions and revolts. Leading up to the Revolution, the American colonists created many local assemblies. An example of this would be the Virginia House of Burgesses, the first colonial legislature. The colonists argued for popular and local sovereignty due to a lack of consent and representation given by the British monarchy in Parliament. The arbitrary acts enforced by the British restricted North American colonies' development geographically through the disregard of local governance and limitations placed on trade by the British mercantile system and its acts. These fueled the colonists to rebel and lead a revolution that emphasized freedom of trade, property rights, and craft a constitution and develop a political system that would avoid the abuse of power from within one person. Some may argue that the British taxes that were imposed on the Americans were to be expected with regards to the recent involvement in the French and Indian War. Also, the argument could be made that the American colonists were protected by the British military and funded by them entirely, so the taxes were to be anticipated. The Quartering Act of 1765 would be seen as valid because the British soldiers provided protection of the colonists' lives. This may be true, however, our thesis still remains valid because of acts like the Townshend Act that tax items such as paper, glass, and tea. This left the colonists with few opportunities to increase their profits through trade and commerce. Also, the Currency Act limited the amount of currency that the colonists could print, limiting their ability to prosper economically. This exploits the British government and shows that the enabling of these acts are not because they were trying to help the colonists, but benefit for their own empire. America's Revolution was instigated and fueled by a numerous amount of acts and laws by England, which affected their economic freedom in the new colonies. Several of these acts increased the taxation of American products and trade. The Sugar Act caused more foreign goods to be taxed, such as sugar, wines, coffee, pimiento, cambric, and printed calico, and it also regulated lumber and iron. The Stamp Act taxed every single piece of paper that was imported. The Molasses Act required that merchants had to pay a tax of 6 pence per gallon on imports of foreign molasses. The Tea Act granted the British East India Company a monopoly on tea in the colonies, which eventually led to the Boston Tea Party. All of these economic restrictions that the British imposed on the colonies are what pushed the colonists to lead such a revolution that stressed economic independence, and it's one of the main reasons that the newly founded United States used a capitalist-style economy so that the same economic limitations with the mercantile system would be avoided in the country's future. Many of these acts limited the freedom of these American colonists. The Navigation Act forced Americans to only use English vessels when trading, which restricted trade and contact with other nations. This caused America to feel resentment towards England because they were not allowing them to trade with other nations. Another law that restricted America's freedom was the Pine Tree Act, which forced American citizens to not use certain trees in the colonies because they were used to make British ships. This angered Americans because it was their land and resources that they couldn't even use. The Currency Act made Americans have to use British currency and not their own, which restricted their freedom to choose. The Quartering Act allowed British soldiers to sleep in American homes whenever they needed, which is a major breach of privacy to American citizens and angered them even more. All of these acts and policies pushed the resentment towards Britain among the colonies even more. After the Revolution, the Americans made many changes to the country's laws and rules because of England's monarchy system, which caused too many unjust practices on the colonists. Writers like John Locke wrote about many issues of government and what it meant to be a true citizen. The ideas that this movement spawned influenced a push towards the revolution and what the Founding Fathers implemented into the Constitution. The Founding Fathers created many counters to these acts previously mentioned. For example, in the Bill of Rights of the Constitution, the Third Amendment made it sure that soldiers were not allowed to forcibly sleep in citizens' homes, which reversed what the British Empire had set for the colonists. Documents like the Constitution and Bill of Rights secure the essential rights of Americans, unlike the British policies previously enforced. The main economic system in America shifted from mercantilism to capitalism, which supported a more competitive business between neighboring citizens. On the international level, President George Washington's Neutrality Proclamation made it even evident that America did not want to be in any long-term entanglements. Things like the Articles of Confederation gave America political power to the states and decentralized the government, which restricted the abuse of power, which is what happened in the British monarchy system. In conclusion, the policies enforced by British upon American colonists, like the Currency Act, the Townshend Act, and the Proclamation of 1763, were some of the factors that fed into the values that were put into the American system after the Revolution. The American Revolution stressed so heavily the principles of independence and sovereignty, freedom and trade, property rights, and the intrinsic values of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. The motivation of independence and property rights can be seen in the future through the ideas behind Manifest Destiny. This is significant because both the American Revolution and Manifest Destiny stressed rugged individualism through the Transcendentalists during the Manifest Destiny, and Adam Smith with his ideas on supply and demand during the American Revolution. Thank you for watching.